Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. It's my, if I'm talking up here, y'all, it is my hope and wish that each and every one of you will tell someone today, hopefully your spouse, that you love them. What did you call those people in school? Okay. Okay. Eckfire, come in here and try to be nice and can't. Y'all bow with me. Heavenly Father, we come again asking you to forgive us of our sins, to say thank you for the wonderful blessings that you bestow on each and every one of us, to say thank you for your love and what it means. Let us do things that please you. Forgive us when we don't. Keep us in your mercy. I ask these things in the Prince of Love's name. Amen. Mr. Hitchens.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, you know I love you. for many years. I bring today House Resolution 1076. It's next to the last on the bottom in a modified open rule. This is simply a resolution asking the federal government to come forward with their commitment to the harbor deepening in Savannah. Originally, they were committed to $706 million. Because of delays and inadequate funding from the federal part. Now the price has risen to $973 million. Hence, we had to come up with $35 million additional dollars this year for the harbor deepening on the state side. If we continue on, it could cost us up to $1 billion. They gave $43 million this year. We need about $100 million a year to stay on schedule.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the illustrious and Grand Rules Committee. I am here to ask for two pieces of legislation today. The first is House Bill 704 under modified open rule. It is right next to that third hole punch on the first page for you. It is currently illegal for contractors to bury garbage on a residential lot after they build the house, but there is an 8-year limit to how long you can hold them accountable for that. This would extend that 8-year limit so that way if someone illegally buries garbage on one of your constituents' lots, it takes an average of 20 years for that to decompose and find. Your constituent will still be able to hold them accountable and get it made right. Before I move on to the second one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday you described the Rules Committee as illustrious. Today you described it as illustrious and grand. How will you describe it if you come back tomorrow?
With two here, I'm very confident I'll be back here tomorrow, Mr. Whip, but I hope for only one.
I'm looking forward to your adjectives.
Thank you, sir.
Did you hear Ms. Smith a while ago?
I did, and
okay. I don't think that's smart. I'm not illustrious, nor are these ugly folks in front of me.
I will come with more tampered adjectives tomorrow.
No more questions.
Then thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second bill that I'll ask you for today is House Bill 783. This is it's three below that previous bill on the first page under modified open rule. This is a code revision package. It is a repeal package to go and eliminate obsolete and unfunded and unmanned committees, commissions, and authorities throughout the state.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kendrick.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am here to request House Resolution 940, which is the last listing under open rule, and this is an urging resolution resolution urging the state of Georgia to host the world's largest startup pitch competition.
No questions, thank you. Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 759, which is the third one on the front page under open rule, which would essentially say once a student has met the qualifications for the special needs scholarship, they would maintain that eligibility.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Today I bring you House Bill 697, and this it has to do with the community health centers and their exemption from sales tax, and it's extending it for 1 year.
What was the number again?
House Bill 697, and it's on the second page. Top of the page. I'm sorry. Thank you. Moved.
You want to do it, you want to do it again since I wasn't listening?
Okay, I'm sorry. It's it has to do with the community health centers, and it extends their sales tax exemption for 1 year. Thank you.
For 1 year?
1 year. I think it's a misprint on here. It's a 1 year.
Rather than 5, it's 1?
Thank you. Yes.
Wait.
Yes. Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know why it isn't 5 years. The federally qualified health programs have about 200 locations across our states, mostly in rural areas, and without them, we would be in desperate need for people to see patients. Why is this down to 1 year?
I agree with you. The reason was because we have a difference in the numbers between our CMS numbers and what our Department of Revenue had, so we are going to give us time for the two to reconcile and make sure it's correct.
Mr. Powell?
If I could address the issue, the original proposal was for 5 years, but the last time that we enacted this particular provision, we put some metrics in the statute to require them to report so that we could gauge whether there was a benefit from the exemption. The statistics they brought to the committee were different than the statistics that they had reported to the Department of Revenue. And because of that disparity, we wanted to give them 1 more year, not 5 years, to get it so that the figures matched and the numbers matched so that we could make the determination that we wanted to make.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Diefenbaugh, one of those.
I am, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to do this in the committee. I'm going to bring 2 to you today. The first one is HB 856, which is under modified open on the first page, about 2/3 of the way down. It is adding the Commissioner of Community Supervision to the board, which was when the last board was made, this group did not exist. So now that it does exist, they want to have that the chance to be a part of the decision making.
Doesn't the bill say ex officio?
He will hold the ex officio position, yes.
Okay. Any questions? No questions. Next one.
The next bill is on the second page under modified structure. It's HB 855. And it is a driver education bill. In the past, fines from the different driving, speeding, reckless driving. There was a 1.5% that was given to this driver education. Now they're wanting it to be 3%, which would allow them to serve many more people. There are 3 categories of which people would fall under in this bill. The first one would be if you're the son or daughter of a fallen soldier, a police, fireman, DNR person, or several other positions would have first crack at this money. And then from there, if you're on reduced lunches, you're going to have some of those that will be available. And then the last one is everyone else. But the bill will offer 30 hours of classroom driving and 5 hours of driving with an instructor, and 6 hours driving with the instructor, I'm sorry. And then you'll have to do 40 hours of driving with a parent or guardian, and those hours be reported back. With that completion of it, they get a 10% discount on their driver's license or insurance. If they are B or better average, they'll get another 10%. So it's a good thing for everybody concerned, and we are concerned about distracted drivers now. We have several bills going through. And with that, this will be a way of reaching these students before they get some bad habits, maybe by watching their parents or whatever, but we can maybe eliminate it and, well, not eliminate it, but it would reduce it and make our roads safer.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen in the well, is it not true that around 2005, this General Assembly authorized a 5% surcharge on fines, and these were to go for driver education statewide?
Yes, sir.
Is it not also true that most of that money never saw driver education but was put into the general treasury?
Yes, sir.
Is it not also true that about 5 years ago, we cut that 5% to 1.5% so that money to see if they could in fact put it in driver education?
Yes, sir.
Is it not further true that now that the department at the Governor's Office of Highway Safety has actually started a scholarship program to Georgia students, whether they be in public school or the tech schools or the private driving schools, if authorized, that they can then get driver education from that 1.5%, and they're in fact running out of money now, and we're asking that they go, that we reinstate to 3%, not 5, but to 3%, so that those roughly $2 more million can go to scholarships for drivers' education in the state of Georgia.
Yes, and they've been much more efficient now than they have been in the past, so this is a good
Is it not
bill.
also true that this is not a tax but a fee on those citations,
That's
those
correct.
driving citations that goes to pay for driver education?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Gentleman, answer the question if he could. He may not have the information, but does the gentleman know of that 5% that Chairman Powell referred to earlier, how much of that was collected and not spent on driver's education?
I know how much is collected, but I do not know how much went to the general fund. Let me see, I can get that for you.
But if the chair will allow, I can get with you later on that. My question, and I'll ask you to you, is isn't it true that if we have money left over that we collected at 5%, that we didn't spend in the way that we should, that perhaps Chairman England and the Appropriation Committee could look at budgeting some of that money now so these scholarships wouldn't have to wait on a fee increase? We could use the money for its stated purpose at the time, much along the lines of what Chairman Powell is trying to do in his House resolution that we're looking at.
It sounds very good. Thank you.
And I think a lot of this conversation tends to go back to something called Joshua's Law.
That's correct.
I think Mr. J. Powell and John Meadows and some others were real interested in that law, and I'm going to say this and then ask Mr. Powell if that's the truth, because we've raised the money. And over the years, some of the money has gone where it was supposed to go. We have had, in some years, a lot of money raised. And like all other things where we go out here and I sure hope that y'all listen to a House resolution today that Mr. Powell is going to present. Anytime we do these things and direct money, it doesn't mean anything. That's just cold hard facts. It goes into the general budget, and the appropriations people try to spend that as best they can on the things that are most needed at that time. It concerns me and several others that we're going to have to go through something hopefully today with Jay and give a map of how we can do what we've intended to do with not just this figure, but solid waste, the tire fund, things like that, where we've said, hey, you know, we're going to charge you this, and it does not get to where we intended. Mr. Powell. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't lying. You got no more questions, thank you. Ms. Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and body, and for the females, I wish you all a good Valentine's Day today, and not the others. Thank you.
He wished, hey, he said, Mr. Chairman, he wished the right person Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here again on House Bill 738, which is on the first page, second bill under open rule, and it's a small procedural change in relation to the probate of wills to give specific added opportunity for creditors to probate a will.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Chandler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 713, under modified structure, the 8th one down, is simply an effort to keep more of our bright students in the state by allowing those students who are ineligible, homeschool students and many private school students, to receive the Zell Miller going into college rather than retroactively if the student has an SAT or an ACT at the 91st percentile.
Are we raising that percentile from what we've got now, or are we lowering it?
We're lowering it. Right now it's the 93rd percentile, and we're lowering it so it is a 10-point percentile difference in the eligible students and the ineligible students.
So currently, if you're not homeschooled, you can do 81 percentile?
I'm sorry, repeat that please, sir.
If you're not a homeschool student, those people that are in public schools, private, whatever, they have to score in the 81 percentile to get the HOPE?
That is correct. Plus, they have to have a 3.7 grade point average.
Are we talking about just the Zell Miller portion of this thing in this bill?
That's correct. This is just the Zell Miller.
So those homeschool students will be under the same rules that they're under right now?
Yes.
For HOPE, just for HOPE.
For HOPE, that we're not changing HOPE at all. This is Zell Miller specifically.
Okay.
Because these ineligible students have not been able to receive the Zell Miller going into college unless they had an SAT or an ACT at the 93rd percentile. They had to get the money back after their freshman year, and we're losing a lot of kids because they can go out of state, get a full ride, plan to come back into Georgia, and then they don't come back.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gravely.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am here respectively on two department bills. The first being on the very last page, House Bill 816. The request has come from the Commissioner of the Department of Revenue and is the same as the request from the Department of Labor, Commissioner Butler, and that is to give these departments the ability to do a nationwide background check and fingerprints on employees that are handling sensitive information on Georgia citizens and residents dealing with employment history and their tax return information. Currently, the departments do not have the ability to do a nationwide background check. The Department of Revenue has expressed that this is a request or to be in compliance with the department, the IRS compliance, and have requested these bills respectively. The second bill for the Department of Labor is on the back of the first page, and that is House Bill 795.
Do the same thing, right?
That is correct, sir. They do the same thing.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. On the first page, I bring you, it's number one on the first page, the third one from the bottom, HR 888. That is the study committee, joint study committee to consider looking at the prospect of converting closed rural hospitals in Georgia into veterans' homes. I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the spirit of the admonition you gave us this morning, I just want to say I love you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you House Bill 664 under structured rule. It's the third one down on the second on the second page, third one down under structured rule. And this would increase the income tax deduction for contributing to a child's 529 college savings plan.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to start on modified structured House Bill 705, would raise the jurisdictional limits for magistrate courts on tort cases from 15,000 to 25,000. That's an update that hasn't been done in about 20 years.
The last
705.
Wait a second. The last update was how long ago?
1998.
I thought we raised it from 5 to 15 not too long ago. Anybody want to jump in and help me? Hey. Anybody want to jump in and help me?
My understanding was it was 98, Mr. Chairman, but I'll certainly.
I was here, not.
Third grade, I think.
I was here when we did it, so it couldn't. Okay. So it hadn't been looked at since 2008. How many states, Mr. Kelly, how many states are at 25,000?
We would, everybody certainly handles their smile claims courts differently, but this would put us in line with our neighbor to the north, Tennessee.
So Tennessee's the only other one?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I want us to lead the way on this effort, though.
Well, when they give us Chattanooga, we'll talk about it. Mr. Parrish.
Representative Kelly, can you tell me, are all magistrate judges required to be attorneys?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. But I think it's important to still note that the plaintiff, the person who brings the claim to the court, would still get to choose their venue. So if they wanted to not go to a magistrate judge that was an attorney, no one would be forced to file there. Second, it's important to note that any finding on tort cases in a magistrate court also has a de novo appeal directly up to the Superior Court as well. And de novo means it starts from the beginning.
So could you tell me one more time why it would be necessary that we raise this limit?
I think it would help bring some efficiency to our judicial system. Second, I think it would, the magistrate court is supposed to be the people's court, and it would allow more of our citizens to get, to seek redress in a more efficient manner and at a less expensive cost.
Well, I think it'd be safe to say that some of our smaller courts have judges who are part-time, they're not attorneys, and some of us have some concerns with that. Thank you.
Mr. Willard.
Mr. Kelly, is it true that we about 5 years ago raised the fees on filings for the state court and superior court, which was what down about $175 to get a case filed in one of those courts, depending on what your local fees are?
Yes, sir.
But it's also true that this is prohibited or limited a lot of people who have claims from being able to get redress without paying the substantial amount of fees which go up to the state. This will allow them to file a case in a lower court, have it expedited as far as a hearing and decision on it, which is what the magistrates do. They have hearings within about 60 days, do they not?
You're absolutely correct there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Next bill.
House Bill 717, just two down there under modified structure, is a bill for our Attorney General that just makes clear that the measure we passed last year for autonomous vehicles makes clear that that autonomous vehicles still fall under Georgia's lemon laws for consumer protections.
No questions.
And then finally, Mr. Chairman, House Bill 827 is the last on our list here under structured. And that's modifications to the rural hospital tax credit. It does a couple things. First, it moves from 90% to 100% tax credit. It also makes clear that pass-through entities, S-corps and LLCs, can also participate in the program.
Questions? No questions. Oh, yeah, you do. Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Representative Kelly, can you tell us how well the tax credit has done so far?
Thank you for the question, and that's one reason why we're back here this year. Is originally when the program started, it was at 70%, and then last year we moved it to 90%, and we essentially put a cap of $60 million that we hoped would flow to our hospitals for this. Unfortunately, only about 10 million were claimed, and we think one reason for that is because it being a 90% credit instead of 100%, and we think that 100% more and more people will take advantage to make donations to the qualifying hospitals and should see a much greater benefit to struggling hospitals all around our state.
I understand that, but is there any indication that people are more likely to take advantage of it and get you to your 60 million?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Hawkins, I'm sorry.
Are you raising the 60 million, or are we keeping the 60 million?
We're keeping it at 60 million, but we did extend the sunset to 2021.
So this is essentially the same language that's in the rural development bill now?
I believe it did get included in Chairman Jasper's bill as well.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
No more questions. Mr. Kelly, you stick around till after this meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you again this morning under modified open rule on the first page. It's House Bill 636. This is the Genetic Counselors Act. This would provide for licensure for genetic counselors. These genetic counselors provide important counseling for people that have babies born with genetic abnormalities, people who have a history of cancer, and increasingly people who have problems with cardiac disease in their family. I would ask for your favorable consideration.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow your instructions to the T. My wife is here with me this morning. I'm going to ask her to stand. I'd like to wish her happy Valentine's Day. We've been married for almost 34 years, and she chased me for 7 before that, before I finally gave in. Yeah.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes, sir.
What are you supposed to say to her?
I love you, baby.
Mrs. Corbett? Did you, that's not what I'm about to ask. Did you get a new car today? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 381.
And y'all, it's a real nice one, too.
First bill under modified open, House Bill 381. This bill simply allows the landowner to petition a county or city to ask for them to perform an inspection on a mobile home to determine if it's intact or derelict. And then if it's derelict, they can go through a process to have it disposed of properly, or if it's intact, to be able to file a lien and go through the process to foreclose on it that way. And I want to thank Chairman Fleming and Chairman Willard for the help perfecting this bill.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And my wife would love to see this voted out.
Mr. Rhodes.
I don't have anybody here to help me. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I bring before you House Bill 782 on the second page under modified structured, fifth from the bottom in that section. This is the PDMP program, modifications in the state that allows law enforcement and the state-owned PDMP to share data with law enforcement from other states through subpoena, and it also enhances the electronic health records for our doctors. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, appreciate the word subpoena. When this was passed back in 2011, after a couple years of back and forth, there was a real desire to make sure that subpoena powers were required to be able to get data that didn't just sort of wash back and forth loosely among the states. Is this a judicial subpoena, or is this pursuant to an administrative subpoena that some particularly some agencies allow, and that some federal law tends to be looser on than our own internal requirements?
This is, let me find the section. It is search warrant or subpoena.
I'll talk to you offline about that. Appreciate you.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Ligon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Before you get started, I want y'all to all know something. Y'all have all been over there with Mr. Mullis, correct? And do you know that you're always put behind all senators? Mr. Ligon, I want you to keep that in mind as you bring your bill. We put you in front of 4 of ours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
and you're supposed to remember how not.
I will convey that to our Rules Chairman. I'll see him when I finish.
You're supposed to remember that as things go through your committees over there.
Yes, sir. I will do that. I will do that. Mr. Chairman, I bring before you and the members of the committee Senate Bill 101. It's at the bottom of the first page under Modified Open Rule. And this allows members of the Employees Retirement System to purchase credible retirement service for their past participation in the Georgia Defined Contribution Plan. It comes at no cost to the state because they have to pay the full actuarial value. They're also allowed to pay it in a lump sum or over time.
Does this bill primarily affect those people that at one time in their lives were called part-time, full-time?
Yes, sir. The part-time, full-time. I think they call them the temporary full-time employees. Yes, sir.
Is it also not true that to buy into this thing is going to be a very expensive situation?
Yes, sir. It will. They have to pay the full actuarial value. It will.
I want my committee to know that I'm going to say we because I happen to have a little knowledge of the bill. We know that, and we don't know how much participation we will get, but there's people out here that are still working for the state of Georgia that have spent up to 10 years as part-time, full-time. We changed the bill in retirement from 2 years to
5 years.
5. Keep that in mind. So they would have had to work in that particular position for 5 years. And that position is full-time, part-time, whatever that means. Any other questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry I had to put a senator in front of you, but we're trying to be nice to somebody.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the committee. I'm bringing in House Bill 750. It's page 1, 8 from the bottom under Modified Open. And what it's doing is honoring not just the veteran that has served in wartime, but also during peacetime. Because I look at it, we don't choose the war, the war chooses us. And so that's why I'm carrying this bill. And I'll answer any questions if there are any.
How many people do you think this affects?
It affects over 700,000 veterans in Georgia currently. But I look at it as it's a great piece, shows that we're a very friendly state towards veterans, and that's why I'm carrying it.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bentley.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you again House Bill 735 on structural rule on the last page, which is expenditures on the maintenance railroad track owned or leased by Class 3 railroad companies, and this is a recommendation of the Rural Advisory Council.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brockway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Under open rule, the fourth one on the item there, House Resolution 744. This is an urging resolution urging the Georgia Occupational Regulatory Review Council to perform duties that it's not currently doing. And since I can't write a law to tell them to comply with the law, we've got an urging resolution to hopefully draw attention to it and shame them into following the law. So that's the gist of it, Mr. Chairman, and I'll happy to explain further or answer any other questions that members may have.
So we already have a law that they do their duty, and now we're going to have to make another law or a resolution to urge them to do their job.
Yes, sir. they're supposed to be performing reviews with each of Georgia's licensing boards and then delivering that report to the legislature, explaining why each of these boards needs to continue to exist, what are the regulations on each one of those professional licenses, so that we as the legislature can act on that if we want to. And they've been given that authority 8 years ago now, and they have not done it once that I can find.
So we have a board that's supposed to do this, and they're not doing it.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me why I have a board?
The board performs other duties. When a member of the legislature requests or proposes a new professional license, they generate a report to help us as a legislature determine whether that's an entity that needs to be, a profession rather, that needs to be licensed. So they're performing those duties. But the second part of the job, where they perform periodic reviews of each licensing board and report back to us, they're not doing that.
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, following along your thought there, if they're going to be a board and not do that, I wonder if we might encourage them a little further by perhaps putting into law, if they don't do that, that would be just cause for them to be removed from that same board, or in furtherance, a civil penalty for them not doing their job.
I'm certainly open to that. I think if the members of this board are already employees of the government. They include the Secretary of State, the Director of Office and Planning and Budget, and those sorts of things. So I don't know we could really remove them from their jobs, but we could perform some other, add some other enticements for them to do their job. So
it would seem like that would be a consideration, and is it not true, Mr. Brockway, that you're trying to get one of those jobs?
If the gentleman so states, yes.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly don't want to take away your opportunity to be on another board, but you said that they advise us as to the need. Can you give us an idea how many times they have advised since they've been aboard?
I've seen several reports. On their website, it doesn't go back too far, but you heard another bill that was asked for by Representative Silcox. They have performed a study on that, and there's a report advising us to license that profession. There was one last year that we considered that advised us not to license that profession, but the legislature chose to do so anyway. So it serves in this advisory capacity. What they're not doing that I think is so incredibly valuable, could be valuable, is help us determine, do we have too many regulations on a given profession, or do we not have enough regulations on that profession? How does that compare to what other states are doing? Is this a board that, a professional license that needs to continue to be offered, or is there another way that could be handled? And I'm talking too long. Sorry.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Y'all know I am not going to be responsible for us starting at 11 or whatever time we start around here now. So we got to get quick. Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I am here to ask for your consideration on House Bill 327. It's first under the structured rule. Contains a number of the provisions and fixes akin to last year's House Bill 340. I think worth noting is that in last year's bill we did pass the leasing fix. It was a reduction in revenue of roughly $70 million as estimated in 2019. We do lower the effective rate from 7 to 6 3/4 in this particular piece of legislation, and we close once again close the loophole that is available out there to the gaming that's going on. Be happy to try to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, if you got one, just hit your button and say your number. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 792, and all it does is extends the sunset on the hazardous waste fund for 1 year. And also, if it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to put my name by HB 782, the prescription monitoring bills by Representative Rhodes.
Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 721 on modified structured rule. This is a department has been asked through negotiation with the Department of Driver Services. This would allow them to do authorized third-party driver's license testing with licensed driving schools and programs that's been in business for a minimum of 10 years. Takes a lot of the burden off of them as far as getting these licenses issued. Secondly, I brought it up yesterday. It would be House Bill 670 under modified open on the first sheet. This is the one that I call this the Barry Fleming bill. Under the Compact for Juvenile Justice, right now they have one legislative appointee, and the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor make that together. This separates that out, so there'll be one from the House and one from the Senate.
Ms. Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to request respectfully Senate Bill 131. It was greatly improved by the House, as in all Senate bills are, particularly on Section 3. There's very important termination of parental rights, updated language. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
What was the numbers?
Senate Bill 131. Sorry, it's down at the bottom of modified structured on the second page.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the second page under modified structure, House Bill 635, this was the bill that allows district attorneys to set up working groups of people the entities that are involved with elder abuse. If you've watched or heard the news this morning, there's a case where 2 assistants watched a man die without giving assistance in a nursing home, and denied that to the police and all until a video was produced, and the police involved didn't know whether that was elder abuse or not. And this is what this committee will do, is help spread and educate about elder abuse and our laws and what we can do about it. Thank you.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Modified open rule, House Bill 418.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name by House Bill 672. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 697, presented today by Darlene Taylor. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 735, Representative Bentley's bill.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 738 for Representative Oliver and House Resolution 940 for Representative Kendrick.
Mr. Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HB 672 by Representative Thomas and HB 735 by Representative Bentley.
Mr. Williamson. You're okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for under modified structure halfway down the page, House Bill 780, the annual housekeeping bill for the Department of Banking and Finance.
Nope. Anybody else? Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 664, helping families save for college.
Okay. All right, this is the calendar for Thursday, tomorrow, under modified open. Happy Valentine's, Mr. and Ms. Corbett. HB 381. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. It's nose, same sign. Okay, it's on. Under modified open, HB 763. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified open. HB 783. Moving in a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, it's listed as HB 635. Yesterday that we changed it to an LC 3725635. I think that's right. Remember, that's the, I gotta speak up? It's Bill 635, but yesterday we changed it to an LC number 3725635. That is the floor amendment approved by rules. You have a move. Do I hear a second? Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed, same sign. Under modified structure, HB 657. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's under modified structure, HB 795. Do I hear a second? Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structured, HB 690. Have two moves. That's second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structured, HB 792. Have a motion. Do I hear a second? Have a motion second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That's it.